Have you ever poured your heart, soul, and sleepless nights into something, only to have it stolen in the blink of an eye? Imagine spending months perfecting a project that could change your career, only to watch your boss smile for the cameras, holding the award that should have been yours. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about revenge, sweet, calculated, and unforgettable. My name is Emily Carter, and until a year ago I believed in the classic American dream. Work hard, stay late, and eventually your effort pays off. I was a project manager at Barton & Cole Technologies, a mid-sized firm in Chicago, specializing in AI solutions for businesses. I was the kind of employee who stayed behind when the office lights dimmed, who skipped family dinners to meet deadlines, who brought coffee for my team because if we were going to grind through late nights, we might as well survive on caffeine together. And at the center of my professional universe was Mr. Daniel Huxley, my boss. Daniel had the kind of charm that fooled everyone in the room. Tall, slick-back hair, tailored suits, the smile of someone who knew how to make people trust him. But beneath that smile was something rotten. While I thought he was a mentor, guiding my career, I didn't realize he was already sharpening the knife he would eventually plunge into my back. It started with a project I had been dreaming about for months. We called it Nova, a software designed to help small businesses automate their logistics without needing expensive infrastructure. It wasn't just a program, it was my vision. I sketched it out late at night on napkins, scribbled diagrams during lunch breaks, and built prototypes with my small but dedicated team. I lived and breathed Nova. It was the kind of project that could launch my career to the next level, or at least that's what I believed. But Daniel, he saw something else. He saw opportunity. First, it was subtle. He'd sit in on our meetings, asking a question here, offering a suggestion there. I thought he was just being supportive. But slowly, he started requesting updates, then asking me to send him drafts of my presentations. And then the conference. Barton & Cole had landed a chance to present at the Global Tech Summit in New York, a stage that could attract investors, partnerships, even national attention. I had been preparing for months, but 3 days before the flight, Daniel called me into his office. His office was everything mine wasn't. Glass walls, leather chairs, bookshelves lined with awards. I sat across from him as he leaned back, steepling his fingers like some villain in a movie. "Emily," he said smoothly, "I'll be taking the lead on Nova's presentation. You and your team did excellent groundwork, but let's be honest. The board wants a senior face up there. Don't worry. You'll get credit internally." Internally. The word tasted like poison. But what could I do? He was my boss. He signed my paycheck. He had the power. So I nodded, walked out of his office, and told myself it was fine. That somehow this would work out. But it didn't. At the Global Tech Summit, Daniel walked onto that stage with my slides, my research, my design, my everything. He spoke with confidence, as though every sleepless night, every revision, every small detail had been his own idea. And when the applause thundered through the room, when Barton & Cole's name flashed across the news the next morning, it wasn't my face on the screen. It was his. He became the golden boy, the visionary CEO in the making. And me? I was invisible. This is just the beginning. Next parts will cover Emily's breaking point, the secret plan she builds in the shadows, the betrayal she uncovers that goes deeper than just the project, her carefully orchestrated revenge, the explosive climax and satisfying ending. After the Global Tech Summit, everything changed. The office buzzed with excitement the morning we returned. Daniel strutted in, holding the award the company had won, basking in the admiration of colleagues. People clapped him on the back, congratulated him, called him a genius. Not once did he mention my name. Not once did he say, "This was Emily's project. This was her vision." Instead, he let the narrative spin itself. Daniel Huxley, the mastermind behind Nova. And I sat at my desk, listening to whispers that cut like knives. Wow, Daniel really pulled it off. No wonder he's on track for promotion. I had no idea he was so hands-on with the technical side. Impressive. Impressive. Hands-on. Those words were mine. My work. My life. But in corporate America, perception is reality. And Daniel controlled perception. First I tried to swallow it. Told myself to keep working, keep my head down. That maybe, just maybe, the truth would come out. But then came the board meeting. I had been called in to give a quarterly update on Nova's development. I walked into that conference room with a binder full of charts, metrics, and projections. My palms were sweaty, but I was ready. Until Daniel walked in. He gave me a smile, tight, almost mocking, and then proceeded to take over my presentation. He flipped through the slides I had prepared, speaking as if the ideas had sprung from his mind. Every time I tried to interject, he smoothly cut me off. The board members nodded approvingly, asking him questions while I sat there silent, my stomach twisting into knots. When the meeting ended, one of the directors clapped him on the shoulder. "Daniel, this is brilliant work. You're a real asset to the company." And in that moment, something inside me cracked. The weeks that followed were worse. Daniel started using me less as a project manager and more like a glorified assistant. He piled administrative tasks on me, kept me buried under reports and spreadsheets while he took the spotlight. My friends at work, those who had seen me sweat through the nights on Nova, avoided saying much. Maybe they were scared. Maybe they didn't want to be associated with someone who had just been steamrolled. At home I couldn't sleep. I'd stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m., replaying every scene in my head. The applause at the summit, the smirk in the boardroom, the way my name was erased from my own creation. And one night, as I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop, something hardened inside me. If Daniel wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. That's when I whispered to myself the words that changed everything. He took everything from me. Now I'll take everything from him. I didn't rush. Revenge isn't about fury, it's about patience. The first thing I did was quietly begin collecting evidence. Every email, every Slack message, every draft I had sent him with my name on it. I backed it all up off company servers onto encrypted drives. Next, I started documenting conversations. If Daniel gave me instructions in person, I'd send him a follow-up email. "Just to confirm, Daniel, you'd like me to implement the solution we discussed for Nova's predictive algorithm?" He would reply, usually with one-word confirmations. "Yes. Correct. Do it." Each reply was a digital footprint. Each message was a nail in his coffin. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed a plan that would not just expose him but humiliate him. I wanted him to feel the same crushing weight of betrayal, the same humiliation I'd endured. And so I began watching him. Daniel loved attention, but attention makes you sloppy. At office happy hours he drank too much. At conferences he mingled with investors and let slip details he shouldn't have. And in his private life, he had secrets. One night, as I stayed late at the office, I overheard him on a call in his office, door slightly ajar, his voice carrying into the quiet halls. He was talking about side deals. Something about promising exclusive access to Nova's technology to a potential partner. Behind the company's back. I froze, my heart racing. Was he selling our tech? I quickly typed notes, every word I caught, and saved them. That night, as I walked home under the cold glow of the Chicago streetlights, I realized I wasn't just dealing with a credit stealer. I was dealing with someone corrupt. Someone dangerous. And suddenly my revenge had a new dimension. I wasn't going to just expose Daniel for stealing credit. I was going to burn down his empire. Piece by piece. Step by step. Until the world saw him for who he really was. A fraud. And I knew exactly where to start. With his ego. There's a difference between wanting revenge and planning revenge. The first is heat. The second is a machine you build slowly, piece by piece. I started by reminding myself of 2 rules. Never act when you're angry, and never burn a bridge you'll need to cross. Daniel had underestimated me because I looked small in his world. Quiet, reliable, convenient. That would be his mistake. It became a ritual. I'd leave the cramped apartment I'd lived in for 3 years, the one with the sagging sofa and the stack of unpaid dental bills shoved beside the TV, and walk to the office after midnight. The city at that hour was softer. Fewer people, neon reflections in puddles, the smell of hot pretzels from a vendor on the corner. It was the perfect cover for me to work without interruptions. I'd brew the cheapest coffee I could find, sit at my usual desk, the one by the window where the city lights framed my laptop, and methodically build the case I needed. I cataloged everything. Drafts, timestamps, version histories, commit logs from our repository that showed which lines of code I'd written, screenshots of chat threads where I'd suggested features, and most importantly, emails I'd sent Daniel with designs attached. For every "I want to give you credit" that turned into silence, there was a written trace proving otherwise. But beyond paper and pixels, I needed people. Not allies who would stand up for me publicly, those were scarce. I needed a network of quiet helpers, those who understood the truth but feared to speak. They would provide corroboration, context, and if needed, testimony. My first recruit was Hannah, a UX designer who had been on Nova from day one. Hannah was the type who doodled wireframes on napkins and brought homemade cookies to sprint demos. She'd watched me present features at 2 a.m., rubbing her eyes, and she'd sat through endless usability testing sessions. When I found her one afternoon at the office cafe, we talked like two conspirators whispering secrets. "Did you see the summit?" she said, voice small. "I did," I answered. "Didn't you find it strange how ideas were presented?" Hannah nodded. She showed me a folder on her laptop, iterations of design comps with my initials. She'd been quietly keeping them just in case. I wasn't the only one who had been erased. Next was Marcus, an IT admin who loved logic puzzles and hated office politics. Marcus could pull up commit histories, timestamps, pull requests, technical breadcrumbs that showed who pushed what and when. He didn't want to get involved at first. He feared corporate retaliation. But when I told him the part about Daniel's side deals, the bit I'd overheard, his face changed. He agreed to do one thing: quietly export logs that would prove the sequence of contributions on Nova. I also found a reluctant wingman in Priya, from legal, who had complained privately about Daniel's unofficial partnerships. She couldn't help me file a complaint, but she did tell me, in confidence, how to document things so HR and outside counsel would take a whistleblower claim seriously. She explained the chain of custody concept, the importance of timestamps, and how to avoid making allegations without evidence. I learned quickly that getting people wasn't about charisma. It was about trust. I buy them coffee, I listen to their lives, I show them proof that made it safe to speak. People help when they believe they're not alone. One of Daniel's strengths was his arrogance. He loved to talk, bragging, name-dropping, promising investors more than the company allowed. That arrogance left traces. He forwarded emails, slipped into conversations, and sometimes, very often, said things in Slack channels he thought were private. I started subtly nudging conversations into written form. If Daniel gave a directive in an offhand hallway meeting, I'd send a follow-up email. "Thanks for the suggestion today, per your request, I'll..." He'd reply with a short confirmation. Those confirmations were small, but they were his voice endorsing my role. I also created a paper trail that made it easier for others to confirm my ownership. I made sure project documents had explicit authorship headers. I asked Hannah to tag her designs properly. I asked Marcus to preserve repository snapshots. Everything was conservative, legal-sounding, and totally defensible. If anyone questioned my methods, I could point to company policy, something Daniel liked to invoke when it suited him. "We follow protocols," he'd say. So I followed them to the letter. People think revenge is cold. It isn't. I cried more in that month than I had in years. I missed birthdays because I was compiling spreadsheets. I burned bridges with friends who thought I took things too far. My mom left me voicemails asking if I was okay. Each message made my heartache and resolve tangle together. But I also felt alive in a way I hadn't for years. There was purpose in each line of evidence I gathered. There was a dangerous clarity to the way plans fit together. At night, when the office hummed and the city breathed, I felt less like a victim and more like an architect. People with fragile consciences have a single soft spot: their image. Daniel's image was shiny and public. He wanted accolades. He wanted the interview snippets, the splashy quotes, the investor smiles. So I fed him small victories, ones I could reclaim later. I allowed him to take credit in tiny, controlled moments while I ensured the underlying record showed otherwise. I handed him polished slides for investor calls that included an acknowledgments slide, one that listed contributors. He'd skim it, never notice the fine print that referenced project repositories, timestamps, and attachments. Those links quietly pointed to the evidence cloud I had been building. At the same time, I nudged investors and partners into asking for technical due diligence. Investors love diligence. It's their defense against snake oil. I whispered to a contact I'd met at a meetup, not to reveal anything, but to recommend a routine technical audit. He mentioned it to his firm. The firm asked Barton and Cole for documentation. Daniel, who had always preferred charm over detail, agreed without thinking. That decision would be his undoing. There was a point when someone suggested something darker. A friend from a startup scene hinted. We could leak a story. An anonymous tip to a reporter. Smear him. It was tempting. It would be fast, it would hurt, maybe irreparably. I declined. That was the rule I set for myself. Expose, don't invent. Use truth as the weapon. Don't stoop to lies. My revenge had to be clean, legally defensible, and morally, if not painless, at least honest. So I continued my slow work. Collecting, documenting, corroborating, and waiting for the right moment when the evidence and the audience would align. By the end of that month, I had 3 folders that mattered. The archive, copies of every draft, commit, email, and design with clear timestamps and authorship. The witnesses, people who would corroborate my story if called, Hannah, Marcus, Priya, and a couple of engineers who'd seen Daniel take credit in meetings. The trap, the external auditor request that would force the company to produce documentation and bring Daniel's off-the-books promises to light. I sleepwalked through the days, but at night, when I allowed myself 1 minute of quiet, I could see it. Daniel standing at the podium with his smile slipping as the auditor started asking for source control logs and signed NDAs. I could imagine his face when the board read the chain of custody showing commit histories and inbox threads where he acknowledged my contributions. I didn't celebrate yet. You never celebrate before the final move. But inside, a small fierce flame burned. I was no longer just reclaiming credit. I was reclaiming my dignity. And somewhere in the building, Daniel was practicing his next speech. He had no idea a storm was gathering, quiet, methodical, and entirely of my making. When the auditor's email landed in our inboxes, it felt like the click of a key turning a lock. It was terse and professional. We will begin a routine technical due diligence for Nova. Please provide source control logs, documentation of contributors, and records of third-party agreements. The email was addressed to Daniel, of course, but a copy was automatically sent to our legal team. That copy was the small crack I had been waiting for. I remember the morning vividly. The sun caught on the skyscraper glass outside my window and turned the city into a glittering mosaic. Inside, the office felt suddenly sterile. People spoke in hushed tones. Daniel's smugness had been replaced by a brittle edge. He tried to act normal, checking his phone, answering messages, but even his steps betrayed him. I kept breathing. I sipped my coffee, the cheap kind from the vending machine, and told myself not to look at him. Not yet. Marcus, my quiet, nerdy ally in IT, slid into my cubicle, eyes wide but calm. He handed me a printout with the header, Repository Access Log. Nova. The log listed commit hashes, timestamps, and author emails. My script pulled the tree, Marcus whispered. Your commits are everywhere. They're dated months before the summit slides Daniel presented. I let the paper rest in my hands like evidence in a courtroom drama. The patterns were stark. My username, my initials, my email, there was no plausible way to reassign authorship. The repository showed who authored each line. You can't fake that without rewriting history, and rewriting history leaves its own footprints. We packaged everything Marcus found into a secure folder and uploaded it to the archive I'd been building. I labeled it plainly, Technical Authorship, Emily Carter. When the auditors arrived, they were as neutral as a judge. 2 middle-aged men in navy suits, polite but implacable. They set up in the boardroom with laptops and a physical binder. I sat in the corner pretending to tidy my desk, though my hands trembled. They asked for documentation. They asked for signed NDAs. And they wanted to speak with the engineers who had worked on Nova. Priya from legal, who had become an unexpected confidant, arranged interviews and advised me on what to say. She told me to stick to facts, to avoid embellishment. At one point, Daniel swaggered into the boardroom and tried to charm the auditors. It was a team effort, he said, laughing too loudly. We all contributed. Emily was a key part, but leadership drove it. One of the auditors, a man with thin-rimmed glasses, tapped his pen against a notepad. We'll need commit logs, access histories, design files, and any correspondence with external partners. His gaze lingered on Daniel for a second that felt like a probe. While Marcus handed over the repository logs, I handed over something else. The notes I'd taken from the overheard phone call, The email threads where Daniel had used ambiguous language about exclusive access, and a string of calendar invites referencing meetings with a group named Valen Partners, a firm that wasn't on the company's approved vendor list. Marcus and I cross-referenced bank transfers. Priya quietly requested copies of contracts. The pieces lined up like a map revealing a hidden route. Daniel had been promising Novus Tech to third parties, promises outside any corporate authorization. The red flags weren't just ethical. They were potentially criminal. I watched Daniel's face when Priya mentioned Valen Partners in a conversation. He managed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He denied it at first, of course he did. But denial is thin armor against logs and signed emails. In the corporate world, loyalties are often held together by convenience. When the audit got serious, people started rearranging themselves. One of Daniel's closest supporters, Oliver, who used to nod approvingly whenever Daniel spoke, started avoiding him. I overheard Oliver on the elevator whispering to a colleague, "If the audit finds discrepancies, we're done." He put us at risk. Another colleague, someone I'd thought distant and cold, quietly emailed me, "If you need me to confirm your contributions in writing, I will." It was a small thing, but it felt like a warm hand on my shoulder in a storm. Daniel attempted to counterattack. He called emergency meetings. He pulled up slides showing his visionary leadership. He forwarded optimistic emails to investors and arranged a PR briefing. He tried to frame the audit as a formality, something that would show the company's strengths. But auditors are not PR people. They ask for receipts. 2 weeks into the audit, Priya arranged a closed session with the board. I sat in the back, the room buzzing like a hive. Marcus presented the commit history, and one by one the pieces fell into place. "Here," Marcus said, highlighting a commit dated months before the summit. "This is Emily's work. The metadata shows her username and email. This aligns with the design documents and the email threads where Daniel acknowledges the features." The board chairman's face, usually placid, shifted to concern. He looked at Daniel. "Why was this presented under your name at the summit?" he asked. Daniel's answer was flimsy. "Talent for public speaking doesn't make an honest explanation." He stammered, shifted blame, and invoked the culture of collaboration. But culture doesn't change metadata. Culture doesn't show timestamps. Then Priya dropped the other bomb. Documents linking Daniel to Valen Partners. Contracts with terms that suggested Daniel had promised exclusivity in exchange for a personal stake. Terms that had not been presented to the board. The boardroom went cold. Within 48 hours, Daniel was placed on administrative leave pending full investigation. He was escorted out with a muted dignity, briefcase in hand, his phone tucked into his jacket. He had tried to delete things, shredded a printed contract in the office shredder, but Priya had already collected backups. You can't unring a bell when there are copies. The office reacted like a body that had suddenly been moved. People whispered. Co-workers looked at each other with a new wariness, and the vacuum Daniel left behind was dizzying. For me, the sensation was complicated. The victory was real, but it came with a strange emptiness. Daniel's suspension didn't erase the months I had spent fighting to be seen. It didn't fix the nights I'd sacrificed, but it did give me something vital. The truth was finally breathing in the open air. The headlines hadn't hit yet, but the internal tremors were loud. Daniel's allies were scrambling. Investors were pausing communications. The auditors dug deeper, and the board convened emergency sessions about compliance, governance, and reputational risk. I walked home that night with the city lights blinking, the cheap coffee in my thermos now cold. I felt exhausted and hollow and oddly at peace. My plan had worked so far. But I knew the fight wasn't over. Daniel still had resources. He had friends who could try to discredit me. He had lawyers who could send threatening letters. The public battle had not begun. The private war had only shifted into a new phase. I tucked my evidence away, updated my archive, and prepared for the next move. The storm had started. Now I would decide where the lightning would strike. The office felt like a pressure cooker. Heat building, steam everywhere, and one small valve could send everything flying. Word about Daniel's suspension leaked. First it was a hushed rumor in the cafeteria, the kind of gossip that begins with a sympathetic, "Did you hear?" Then a terse internal memo from HR that said nothing but said everything. "Senior leadership is under review." By noon, our Slack channels were full of speculation. By evening, someone posted an anonymous thread on a tech forum speculating about Barton and Cole's leadership problems. I watched all of it from my desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I knew leaks are messy. Leaks are dangerous. The last thing I wanted was for the narrative to be shaped by rumor. The falsehoods spread first, truth can look defensive. So I planned the narrative. Within a day of Daniel's suspension, our inbox is filled with formal letters. His lawyer wrote in measured, cold sentences. These allegations are defamatory and without merit. We demand an immediate cessation of any public dissemination of confidential information and a retraction. The tone was less about truth and more about intimidation. HR counsel forwarded the letter to Priya and to the board. Priya's coffee brown eyes narrowed as she read it. They're trying to scare people into silence, she said. Classic playbook. Daniel's lawyer had one advantage: money. Legal letters are expensive sounding and exhausting. They make you second-guess yourself. But I had prepared for this phase exactly the way I had prepared for the audit, methodically, with backups and witnesses. I emailed the board a concise, factual memo. Timelines, commit logs, witness names, and the means to verify everything independently. I also shared my concerns about the alleged side deals with Valen partners, attaching the relevant calendar invites and email snippets. It was a calm, unemotional file, precise, professional, and hard to refute. Barton and Cole's PR team panicked. They drafted a holding statement that was bland and defensive. We take these matters seriously and are conducting a thorough review. They wanted to keep things internal. They feared lawsuits, stock wobble, investor flight. But the press had smelled blood. A tech blogger who had once covered our startup incubator called, blunt and hungry. I heard something big. Is it true Daniel presented someone else's work as his own? He wanted a comment. He wanted a scoop. I could have stayed quiet. Many whispered that was safer. But staying quiet would let Daniel's defenders shape the story. Misunderstanding, team effort, senior leadership under temporary review. Those narratives would paint me as petty. So I made a choice. The truth would be public and it would be precise. I drafted a statement short, factual, and with links to the evidence. I worked with Priya to ensure everything was non-defamatory and legally sound. We avoided sensational language. Instead I wrote, I am Emily Carter, project lead on Nova. I contributed XYZ with links to commits, timestamps, and design files. When Nova was presented at the Global Tech Summit, my contributions were not acknowledged. I have cooperated fully with the company's audit, and am sharing documented evidence to ensure transparency. I posted it on a personal blog and shared the link on my LinkedIn and Twitter accounts, platforms where professional credibility matters. I tagged Barton and Cole's official handle and at Valen Partners, the suspicious third party. The post included clean screenshots, repositories, read-only viewers, and contact for independent verification. Then I sat back. Not long after, the tech blogger published a careful piece that quoted my post verbatim and linked to the evidence. It wasn't a smear. It was documentation. The story spread fast. Colleagues texted me. That was brave. Strangers messaged. We believe you. Investors asked the board for comment. The world was watching. Media attention is a wild animal. It can protect you by shining light, but it can also distort. Nightly news wanted a soundbite. Tabloid feeds wanted scandal. I did interviews only with outlets Priya approved. We refused clickbait. We gave them calm, facts-first statements. Some journalists attempted to dig into my past. Some tried to find dirt to discredit me. It hurt. I had to tell my sister to stop reading the comments. Hatred and support arrived in equal measure. The comments section beneath the articles was a battlefield. She's a whistleblower, read one thread. She's out to ruin a man's career, read another. Through it all, the proof held. Reporters with technical chops called Marcus to confirm commit histories. Hannah was quoted about the design iterations. Priya provided context on governance and NDAs. The narrative shifted from rumor to corroborated reporting. As pressure mounted, Daniel struck back. He's human. Vulnerable people fight to save themselves. He released a counter-narrative through a small business magazine profile. I've mentored Emily. We all work together. His lawyer issued threats again. Anonymous colleagues started whispering on message boards that Emily was ambitious and sour grapes. Stung because it was personal. People I'd once shared pizza with hesitated to like my posts. But the auditor's findings and the board's inquiries were public enough that the murmurs lost power. I kept returning to what had always steadied me: documentation. Facts are stubborn things. Public support surprised me. Not just strangers, but former colleagues from other firms who had experienced similar thefts messaged me. A woman from Seattle wrote, "I had this happen to me years ago. Thank you for speaking out." An ex-employee sent a scanned email where Daniel had taken credit for an idea on a past project. Outside of calls and messages, small human gestures mattered. Hannah sent a batch of homemade cookies to my desk with a sticky note. "For the woman who finally got the world to listen." Priya left a thumb drive on my keyboard with additional documents she'd uncovered after the initial audit. The normalcy of that. Cookies, sticky notes, a thumb drive kept me anchored. The board, battered by press attention and investor concerns, convened emergency sessions. They were suddenly accountable not only to internal governance but to public perception. Compliance teams worked overtime. Investors demanded updates. Vallon Partners reps were asked for documentation. They delayed. Delay is sometimes a tell. Under pressure, the board released a statement. "We are conducting a full independent investigation and have placed senior leadership on leave pending the findings." It was cautious language, but it was action. Daniel hired high-profile counsel, which only escalated the optics. You could see it in his face in leaked photos, the strain, the attempt to maintain composure. He called board members, friends, and old contacts. He tried to find a way to pivot the story away from him. A major investor, one that had been quietly watching, issued a statement indicating they would pause further funding until governance issues were resolved. For a mid-sized company like Barton & Cole, that was like holding a bucket under a leaking roof. It forced immediate, practical decisions. The company initiated a forensic accounting probe into the Vallon Partners contracts and flagged several irregularities. This wasn't just about credit anymore. It was about fiduciary responsibility. More importantly, the board publicly committed to transparency. They promised to publish summaries of the investigation. That promise changed the dynamics. The fight moved from rumor and intimidation into a procedural, institutional process where evidence mattered. As the story went public, the stakes rose. Daniel's legal threats became louder. His allies wavered. The auditors and the board dug deeper. Investors watched closely. My phone buzzed constantly, messages of support, hate, curiosity. Every morning felt like a new balance to hold. I had achieved something pivotal. The narrative was no longer in Daniel's hands. The public could see the evidence. The company had started to hold itself accountable. But this was not yet the finale. Legal battles lay ahead. Daniel had lawyers with deep pockets. The media had momentum that could be both a sword and a mirror. And most dangerous of all, retribution doesn't always come from the person you're fighting. Sometimes it's the institution itself that tries to bury you for making waves. I slept badly that week. When I did sleep, I dreamt in fragments, commit hashes like strings of numbers, board members' faces like clouds, headlines rolling. But under the fear, there was also a fierce, quiet satisfaction. The truth was out, and that truth would keep moving forward. The quiet after the media storm was deceptive. It wasn't peace, it was the eye of the hurricane. 3 days after my blog post went viral, a thick envelope arrived at my apartment. Cream-colored, embossed seal, my name typed in bold. Inside, a cease and desist letter from Daniel's legal team. You are instructed to immediately remove all defamatory statements, retract your blog post, and refrain from further public comment. Failure to comply will result in litigation. Litigation. The word alone felt heavy, like a gavel cracking against bone. I won't lie, I panicked. My first thought wasn't bravery, it was, I don't have money for lawyers. What if they crush me? I paced the living room, letter in hand, muttering half aloud. My cat, Jasper, stared from the couch, unbothered. My phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. Hannah, don't freak out. This is intimidation. Priya and I are with you. So I forced myself to sit down, breathe, and call Priya. She answered on the second ring. Emily, listen, she said, calm but firm. This is a scare tactic. Cease and desist letters are the cheapest way to rattle someone. They don't mean you've done anything wrong. You've documented the truth. Truth is a defense. But what if they actually sue me? I asked, voice shaking. Then we fight, she said. And we don't fight alone. There are whistleblower protections, and now there's public attention. If Daniel drags you into court, he drags his reputation with you. Priya connected me with an employment attorney she trusted, a woman named Laura Chan. Laura specialized in whistleblower cases. Her office smelled faintly of lavender and coffee when I went in, and her handshake was warm, grounding. She reviewed the documents I prepared, the commit logs, the emails, the contracts. She smiled almost approvingly. Emily, you did half my job for me, she said. This isn't defamation. This is evidence. If they sue you, we countersue for retaliation. That word retaliation shifted something in me. It meant the law could shield me. It meant I wasn't just cornered prey, I had rights. Of course, Daniel didn't stop at legal letters. He hired a PR consultant who planted flattering op-eds about him. Visionary leader faces jealous rivals. LinkedIn posts appeared praising his mentorship. Anonymous accounts on Twitter accused me of sabotaging my own boss for clout. The smear campaign wasn't subtle, it was textbook. But it worked on some. Old contacts stopped returning my calls. A neighbor avoided eye contact in the elevator, whispering after I stepped out. Still, every smear he launched I countered with one thing: facts. Calm, boring, irrefutable facts. When trolls accused me of lying, I linked to public commit histories. When op-eds painted me as emotional, I let Marcus publish a technical breakdown of my contributions. Dry, precise, undeniable. Meanwhile, Barton and Cole scrambled. The board couldn't ignore the press, the investors, or the audit findings anymore. An interim CEO was appointed. Compliance officers took over Daniel's portfolio. His corner office, once a fortress of glass and leather, sat empty, blinds drawn. The company announced a new whistleblower policy in an all-hands email. Employees could report anonymously without fear of retaliation. They framed it as strengthening company culture. But everyone knew what had triggered it. When that email hit inboxes, my coworkers sent me quiet messages of thanks. Because of you, we feel safer. One wrote. I read those messages late at night, tears blurring my screen. Weeks later, the board convened a special hearing. Lawyers on both sides attended. Daniel's high-priced team and Laura by my side. I remember the air in that conference room, dry from recycled ventilation, tense like static before a storm. Daniel sat across from me, jaw clenched, tailored suit sharp as a blade. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His lawyer spoke first. These allegations have irreparably harmed Mr. Whitmore's reputation. We demand an immediate settlement, including a written apology and withdrawal of all claims. Laura leaned forward, unflinching. My client documented her work meticulously. She has evidence, witnesses, and corroboration. If you wish to proceed to trial, we will subpoena additional records, including financial dealings with Vallon Partners. Do you really want those exposed? The word subpoena landed like a thunderclap. The room went silent. Even the board members shifted uncomfortably. Daniel's lawyer backpedaled, softer now. Perhaps we can discuss resolution. Walking out of that boardroom, my legs trembled. It wasn't victory yet, but it was something. An acknowledgement that I wasn't powerless anymore. On the subway ride home, I watched strangers scrolling their phones, oblivious to the war I was fighting. A teenager played a game, a woman read a romance novel, a man napped against the window. Normal life went on, and somehow that grounded me. For months, Daniel had loomed like a storm cloud over every waking thought. But in that moment I realized storms pass. Truth may move slowly, but it moves forward. Daniel wasn't finished. His allies still whispered. His legal team still schemed. The board still hesitated, weighing loyalty against liability. But the tide had turned. I wasn't just an employee fighting a selfish boss anymore. I was a whistleblower standing against an institution that had enabled him. And for the first time, the company was more afraid of what I knew than I was of what they could do. And that realization, that shift of fear, was the most empowering revenge of all. The walls around Daniel began to crack, not with a bang, but with 1,000 tiny fractures. One morning, the Financial Times dropped an exposé. Headline: Tech executive under fire, allegations of misconduct and misappropriation at Barton & Cole. The article wasn't just about Nova anymore. It dug deeper, into side contracts with Valen partners, travel reimbursements that didn't add up, and whispers of deals that bypassed compliance checks. It cited unnamed sources close to the matter. I didn't need to guess who they were. Priya had been feeding them leads. The dam had burst. News trucks parked outside Barton and Cole's glass headquarters. Employees had to slip in through side doors to avoid cameras. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Every Slack ping felt like an alarm, every whispered conversation like a conspiracy. On TV, pundits debated the scandal. Some called it the #boss revenge story of the decade. Others asked if whistleblowers like me were heroes or opportunists. Hashtags trended. #InnoVA project. #credit the creator. #boss revenge. I sat on my couch, remote in hand, watching strangers dissect my life. My inbox flooded. Job recruiters, journalists, old college friends who hadn't texted in years suddenly wanted to catch up. But the attention wasn't all supportive. Anonymous trolls filled my DMs with venom. Jealous witch. Career destroyer. One even sent a death threat. I reported it, blocked it, but the words lingered like smoke. The board had once protected Daniel. Now they distanced themselves. His closest lieutenant, a VP named Greg, quietly resigned. Investors who'd praised him 6 months ago issued sterile statements. We support the ongoing investigation and transparency. I saw it in Daniel's face during one board call that leaked online. His composure cracking, lips tight, forehead damp with sweat. The man who once strutted through offices like a king now looked like prey. But predators don't go down quietly. He tried to frame himself as a victim. In a televised interview, he leaned forward, voice trembling just so. I've given my life to this company. These attacks, these lies, they're meant to ruin me because I demanded excellence. It was rehearsed, almost convincing. For a moment I feared people might buy it. But then the interviewer pulled out a document. A leaked internal memo showing discrepancies in his expense reports. His smile faltered. The clip went viral. Comments poured in. Caught red-handed. Classic gaslighting, boss. While Daniel's empire crumbled, my own world wasn't intact. I barely slept. Every night haunted by headlines. Every morning starting with a knot in my chest. My sister begged me to step away from social media. My best friend, who worked in a different company, admitted she felt awkward introducing me at parties. Everyone knows your name now, Emily. You're kind of infamous. And Hannah, my closest ally at work, grew distant. The pressure of being associated with me was heavy. One night, she canceled dinner last minute. Her text read, I just need space. Sorry. That hurt more than any troll comment. Revenge had power, yes. But it also had a price. One evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of cold tea untouched. Jasper purred in my lap. I scrolled through emails until one stopped me. It was from a young software engineer I'd never met, working at a small startup across the country. She wrote, I watched your story unfold. Last month, my boss took credit for my work in front of investors. I wanted to quit. But seeing you fight, it gave me courage. I reported it instead. Thank you. Tears spilled before I realized. That single message reminded me why I hadn't backed down. Why I couldn't. This wasn't just about me and Daniel anymore. It was bigger. Finally, the board issued a statement. Effective immediately, Daniel Whitmore is terminated as CEO of Barton and Cole pending ongoing legal review. The news alert buzzed my phone as I sat in the office cafeteria. Around me, employees gasped, whispered, some even clapped quietly. I didn't smile. Not yet. The battle wasn't truly over. Daniel still had lawyers, and smear campaigns don't vanish overnight. But the king had fallen. The man who once stole my work, who dismissed me with a smirk in every meeting, who thought himself untouchable, was out. Exposed. And yet, as satisfying as that was, I wasn't celebrating. Because revenge isn't clean. It leaves scars on reputations, on friendships, on trust. Still, the truth had triumphed, at least for now. And in the quiet of that moment, I whispered to myself, this is only the beginning of accountability. The headline burned across every business news site. Barton and Cole CEO terminated amid scandal. It should have felt like victory. But instead it felt like standing at the edge of a battlefield. Smoke clearing, wreckage everywhere. And no real sense of triumph. Within days, Barton and Cole scrambled to rebrand itself. The interim CEO sent a company-wide email. Our culture must reflect integrity. Effective immediately, we are instituting a transparent recognition system for employee contributions. Every project will have a clear authorship log. No more ambiguity. It was progress. Meetings were different, credits shared properly, voices like mine actually heard. But the air was also thick with caution. People lowered their voices when I walked by, as though I were both a hero and a warning. Some treated me with respect, too much respect, the kind that builds walls instead of bridges. Others avoided me entirely, afraid I might expose them next. The board offered me a promotion. Senior project manager. Higher salary, bigger office. On paper, it was everything I'd wanted. But when the offer letter slid across the table, I hesitated. Because I could see the truth between the lines. This wasn't just a reward. It was also containment. They wanted to keep me close, keep me quiet, keep me under the banner of Barton and Cole so the whistleblower story could be spun into internal reform. Was that justice? Or just another kind of leash? Hannah eventually came back. One afternoon she left a coffee on my desk with a note. I'm sorry I pulled away. I just wasn't strong enough to stand in the fire with you. I forgave her. Because I understood. Not everyone signs up to be scorched just because you chose to light the match. But other relationships never recovered. Some colleagues transferred departments. A mentor I once admired never replied to my emails again. At family dinners, relatives avoided the topic altogether, as though silence could erase the headlines. At night, lying awake, I asked myself, did I win? Daniel was gone. The company had changed. But I wasn't the same either. My name was now synonymous with boss revenge. Recruiters called me a symbol of integrity. Strangers online labeled me a hero or a troublemaker. The truth? I didn't feel like either. I just felt tired. Revenge, I realized, doesn't restore what was stolen. It doesn't give back sleepless nights, or mend broken friendships or erase fear. What it does give is something quieter. Proof that lies don't last forever. One morning, I got an email from a nonprofit that advocated for workplace equity. They asked if I would speak at a conference. The subject line read, Turning Pain into Change. I stared at the screen, fingers hovering. Part of me wanted to decline, to disappear, to build a quiet life far from headlines. But another part of me knew silence is how people like Daniel thrive. I typed back a single word. Yes. Daniel's empire had collapsed. Barton and Cole was rebuilding. My career was altered forever. But the biggest change wasn't external. It was inside me. I had stepped into fire, and though it burned, I walked out carrying something Daniel could never steal. My own voice. And that, in the end, was the most satisfying revenge of all. The boardroom fell into complete silence. The last email was still projected on the screen, glowing like a sword in the dim conference room. It was undeniable. Every single idea, design, mock-up, timeline, even the quirky little notes in the margins, they all came from me. Karen's face drained of color, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The room, once dominated by her voice, now belonged entirely to me. I let the silence stretch, letting the weight of truth press down. This, I said finally, steady and firm, is the reality. Months of my dedication stolen, presented as someone else's work. And I stayed quiet, until now. Whispers rippled across the executives. Mr. Grant, the CEO, leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. Karen, he said slowly, is this true? Karen stammered. I may have contributed, but she's exaggerating. I stepped forward, clicking to the next slide. Screenshots. Timestamp drafts. Even Slack messages where she dismissed my contributions, only to recycle them in polished presentations. Every piece of evidence nailed her to the wall. There was no escape. Finally, Mr. Grant slammed his hand against the table. Enough. Karen, this is a violation of trust. You'll step down from your role effective immediately. Security will escort you out. The gasps were audible. Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the security team was already moving. Her empire of lies crumbled in an instant, and she was powerless to stop it. As she was let out, she turned to me with a look that was part hatred, part desperation. But I didn't flinch. For once, I wasn't the quiet, overlooked employee. I was the one who held the truth, and I had spoken it loud enough for the entire company to hear. When the doors closed behind her, Mr. Grant turned back to me. His voice was firm but kinder now. You should have spoken up earlier. But today you saved us from a fraud. From this moment you'll be leading the project under your name. You've earned it. Applause filled the room. My colleagues, the same people who once whispered doubt, now clapped and nodded at me with respect. But more than the title or recognition, it was the vindication that mattered. Karen thought she had broken me, silenced me, erased me. Instead, I had turned her own game against her. Later that evening, I walked out of the office into the cool night air. For the first time in months, I felt free. No more hiding in the shadows of someone else's ambition. No more doubting my worth. This revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about reclaiming what was mine. And as the city lights flickered around me, I smiled. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't rage or chaos. It's justice. As I walked home that night, the city felt different. The streets, the glowing windows, even the hum of traffic. Everything seemed lighter, freer. For months I had lived with a knot in my stomach, afraid of being overshadowed, afraid of standing up for myself. But in the end, it wasn't the fear that defined me. It was the choice to fight back, to take a stand. Karen's downfall wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. About proving that no matter how powerful someone seems, the truth will always catch up. She had built her success on lies, and lies are fragile. The moment truth touched them, they shattered. And me? I wasn't the same woman anymore. I was no longer invisible, no longer the quiet one in the corner. I had a voice, and I had finally used it. The promotion, the recognition, the respect. Yes, those were victories. But the real victory was within myself. I had learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act even when you're terrified. So here's my lesson for you. Never let anyone steal your light. Protect your work, protect your worth. Because if you don't fight for yourself, no one else will. And remember, sometimes revenge isn't about ruining someone else. It's about reclaiming what was always yours. Pause, emotional beat. Now I want to hear from you. Backhand index pointing right. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Backhand index pointing right. Have you ever had a boss or coworker steal credit for your hard work? Share your story in the comments. I'll be reading every one. And if this story hit close to home, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because you never know who else might need the courage to stand up for themselves today. Closing line, dramatic but uplifting. This was my revenge story. Not written in anger but written in justice. And maybe, it's only the beginning.